I met David Raven last year filming workshops in schools, where David was one of the facilitators. What he does is called Forest School, an approach to education that blends play, freedom, and the outdoors. But Forest School is just an entry point into how David thinks about the world. In this conversation, we talk about what play actually means when you're an adult, why improvisation is a form of truth-telling, what theater taught him about presence, and how he's been thinking about bringing this work into prisons. My name is Piotr, and this is Empirical Animal Podcast Experiment. Pleasure to have you here on the podcast, David. Thanks for accepting the invitation. I would like to start for the audience to explain how we've met, because until quite recently, quite a lot of my filming work was around activities with kids. So I would film all sorts of workshops facilitated by people like you in different circumstances, and that kind of happened randomly for me. And I immersed myself in the realm that I've been completely disconnected for many years, and had a lot of fun. And in many ways, that was, for my filmmaking, probably really the best ground to learn, with a lot of movement, a lot of spontaneous things happening, pretty much anything that you can imagine. And it's been extremely valuable. And to the point that I couldn't really predict. And so the workshop that you were facilitating was the Forest School back then. And there was a lot of playing, spontaneous playing, helping people to play, helping kids to play. And so maybe the good point to start would be, like, what is that you actually do? And give us like a broader picture of who you are, what are your interests, where was the background that you come from, and how these things connect.
That's a very interesting question. So, as you say, I met you as part of the Children's University, where money had been put forward to a number of different organisations to go into schools and to provide children with platforms that might not have had access to, especially very underprivileged schools. So the school that I was in and the school that we both found ourselves in, you could tell that the children had a lot of issues, multiple issues, either at home or in school, or both, probably most normally feed into each other. And so it was a question of me guiding them to want to engage with whatever I was doing. So, and this is what I often find with play. It doesn't really matter what I'm doing. I could be just whistling and they can join me in the whistling, or I can hum a tune and they can join me in humming the tune. As long as you engage in them in a way that they find, they can understand it, they can relate to it, and they can explore and enjoy themselves. That's the most important thing, because that's also when a sense of team building comes along, a sense of spirit comes along, or team spirit comes along. But what I was doing with them at the time was making tools out of wood. And when I say wood, it's just simple sticks and string. And it really is the opportunity for them to do whatever they want. So I love the fact that there were, and there always is, there's crossbows if the schools are happy to have some weapons being made, but the weapons don't serve as how we see them. They're not destructive in the eyes of the child. They are just something that they're creating, which they understand. They see from something else, so they see it from Ninjago, or they see it from something, and they want to make it. But then we had wands, we had fishing rods, we had children who were just swinging the sticks round and enjoying and understanding the playfulness of the physics behind that. And really appreciating that for themselves for the first time, or maybe not for the first time, but maybe continuing to expand on a piece of learning that they've already had. And for me, that's what Forest School, and indeed teaching children, is all about. It's all about extending upon their own learning. So saying to them, right, I'm going to give you this amount of stimuli. Then I want you to show me what's next, what comes after this. And I'm always intrigued by what that is, because that in itself informs my practice. That in itself informs what I'm going to do next. So where I come from, I came from a theatrical background. And as such, we were always encouraged to play. We were always encouraged to improvise. And I love improvisation. In fact, I do open mic nights sometimes. And I'm really tempted one day just to go in there and say to people, give me a couple of different things to sing about, and I'll try and make a song about it. And funnily enough, my sister does the same. So she has her own podcast called Raise. And she, at the end of it, says, so I've listened to you, and I know a bit about you anyway, but I've written this poem, and now I've changed it slightly, and I'm going to do a slightly different poem just for you. So us as a family, we were always being encouraged to play. I used to do something with my mum and my dad, but specifically my mum, where you would draw a doodle and then you would add to the doodle, so to make it a real picture. And then you would do a doodle for the next person, and then they would add to that to make it a real picture. And it brings about this creative sense of, I've got something, what do I have next? What's the next bit? So I always had that. But the theatre studies, the where I've got to has always, it's very organic process, and I'm very interested in the organic process of things. And I think that's partly why we had such a good conversation, is because we were able to talk about this organic nature of things, and also how that's informed us as a species, which I find incredibly fascinating.
Absolutely, yeah. So thank you for giving the context. I think that for me, that experience, of well, specifically experiencing how you facilitated forest school gave me some reflection on how I operate in the world, because it's not just for kids. It's basically the maintaining the capacity to play and experiment is like probably even more important, I'm discovering now, in my adult life, because it's basically allowing me to stay adaptable, and just seeing how fast the world is shifting, and losing that is could potentially make life more challenging. So currently I'm more and more opening myself up to playing, and so let's go more into that direction. So what does like play mean to you? And not necessarily, I mean, feel free to speak in the context of your work with children, but also for yourself personally. Now you already touched on it, that your open mic performances are exactly an example of play. So how do you cultivate play now in your life?
It's a really interesting question, because as part of doing my coursework to do my level 3 qualification, which allows me to be a forest leader in my own right, because at the moment I'm working for organisations. But in order to be a forest leader in my own right and have my own practice, I'm having to do this coursework. And one of the questions is, what is play? And really, play is something which children and us experience for no other purpose than to play. It doesn't have a specific set of goals. It just says, here are a series of activities which you may bounce from one thing to the next and have no idea what the correlation is between the last one and the first one. But you're just jumping, you're just diving in and seeing what happens. So you've got 80 children. 80 children could all play together, in a playground, and they bounce. They literally bounce off each other. They push each other over. They run into each other. They scream and they shout. they're constantly changing, they're constantly evolving. And play is all about that. Play is all about being adaptable, as you say, and being willing to just be open to that adaptability. I read or saw a really interesting TED talk even before I started forest school about the fact that I think it's some cultures, I can't remember exactly, I think maybe some Eastern European cultures, but the grandparents weren't encouraging the children to play. So the parents were, because they'd kind of had an understanding of what it meant or what they'd experienced and understood it. But when the grandparents were given the opportunity to have the children, they weren't encouraging the children to play. And it's hugely important that they can, because that is where they build, you know. And I think so much of our current curriculum, especially when they get to high school, isn't geared towards play anymore. In fact, when my nephew first started at school, in primary school, he was like, "Oh, so when do we get out the Lego?" And they were like, "No, we're not getting out Lego today. We're just doing English and we're just doing maths and science." And it really struck him, I think, because he was so used to being able to play. And he's a creative individual. He's massively creative. And as soon as you start to stunt that in someone, they lose their ability to engage in the way that they were before. And I find it's really sad, because when children are given the opportunity to play, there are two things that happen. One is that they engage in the way that they want to engage, and therefore there's no question about good or bad behavior, except that if they run into another child or hit them or something, there has to be parameters. But often as well, that will get managed by the actual children playing. They will manage it themselves. They'll say, "Do you know what? There's some friction here. There's some violence starting. Let's close that down ourselves." And that's really interesting as well, because so often in society, we don't allow that to happen. But the other thing that happens with play, once they're given the opportunity to play, is they go wherever they want in their mind. They go wherever they want in their mind, and they start picking up on things which we have no real comprehension of. So I could be teaching them about building something with two sticks, and I could say, "Oh yeah, this reminds me of a sail." And they're like, "Well, I really like the water, and I like going out on the water, and I love watching things. When I throw stones, I love watching the ripples." And for me, that's brilliant, because that's just them expanding their mind and saying, "I remember what I did when you're talking about water. I remember something where I went down to the water and I watched the ripples. And I know, and I want to know more about how the ripples spread." And that allows me to then talk about water displacement. So there's all of these things which, and I don't have all the answers sometimes. And I think that's brilliant as well, because I then say to them, I don't know all the answers. So I'd like you to go and find out for yourself. And then next week, come back and tell me if you've remembered, if you've got the presence of mind. And it's incredible when the children do, when they suddenly come to me 2 weeks later or something and go, "I found out. I know what water displacement is. I started looking into it myself." And you get a 10-year-old suddenly talking like a 12 or 13-year-old, because they've had that experience of being given the opportunity to play. I had an amazing history teacher who, he always said, "I'm going to teach you at a level 2 years above where you are currently. And I want you to try and understand where we're coming from at any given moment." But he was also fantastic, because all of his lessons started with him just talking to us about himself and his own journey. And we were interested in it. But he had the bravery and the courage to just walk into a room and say, "Guys, I'm not going to talk to you about history. I'm going to talk to you about when I worked in Swatch and when I was building things in a factory. And then I'm going to talk to you about history, because it relates somehow to what I was doing in the factory. It relates to a personal relationship that I'd had with someone. It relates to something." But because he'd engaged our minds already, we were fascinated. We were fascinated by this character. We were fascinated by the journey that he'd already been on. And so he gave us the opportunity to join in with him. And that's something that I try and do as well. I try to give the children just a small hook that says, "Who is Dave? Who is Dave? What does Dave want to teach me today?" I just find it incredible that they give me that opportunity, and that I'm continue to have that opportunity. And I keep wanting to play. And I'm really interested. So when I do only my open mic night stuff, I come away with it with a sense of play, because there is no right or wrong answers. And I'm given an amazing, with the guys that I go and I say guys, the people that I'm going to see and perform in front of, they're so encouraging. You know, I get quiet. I just use my voice, and when I'm singing, I just get a real amount of respect. There's other people that play sometimes, and there's noise in the background. But when I'm singing, I get this real sense of like everyone is engaged, and I cannot explain the value that allows me to feel that my music is heard. And you know, I'm really pleased that I'm able to provide some sense of entertainment with just my voice. And so therefore I keep writing songs, and I keep writing more and more stuff. And by writing my songs as well, I'm engaging with the politics of the world as I see it, which is massively important to me. So, and that's part of the reason I encourage children to play in the way that they do, because it also allows me to sow little seeds of, we're not doing everything we can, and you're of a certain age, but I don't want you to think that you're not part of the solution, even now. You know, if you were to say to your parent every time they drop some litter, please don't drop that litter, please don't drop that on the floor, or don't buy that because, you know, it's not a good thing for you to be buying. It could make all the difference. Well, we don't know unless we try. And that's the other thing with play. Play often says, if you don't try, you won't know. So that's my motto whenever I'm doing forest school, and the kids say, I'd like to do this. I'm like, well, okay, well, if you don't try, you won't know. So put me on the spot sometimes, say, Dave, I want to climb the tree. Okay, well, at the moment, I've got 15 other children doing something else, but at some point, if I can, I will facilitate that. And I think that's one of the other really hard things, is currently all schools are expected to teach 30 children. So even if you've got the best teacher in the world, every time they're expected to teach 30 children at a time, it becomes really difficult. And there's multiple scenarios now where the play is being taken away, because as soon as you start to let some children play, there is that sense of chaos which can then emerge, which then becomes very difficult to control as the teacher. So there has to be a balance. But at the same time, I think there's probably a whole lot of stuff which we could teach children without this very rigid curriculum. I might be wrong. I'm very interested and very keen to see what could be learned, what could be possible. Obviously, I came through the curriculum, so I know what I've been taught. But I also know, and I think, that had I been given books and things to read and other children to talk to, there's a potential that I might have picked things up anyway. So, you know, there are questions that I have in my own mind. But the fact that I'm willing to engage with that, I think, makes the difference.
So here, you know, I would like to kind of highlight my appreciation for how you kind of treat your work in a way like as an open research. So it's not just you facilitating the activities, but you're reflecting on what's happening in the real time. You're drawing conclusions, making observations, which are of the kind of more like, you know, more general nature. So it's like, you know, you're working with a group of kids, individuals in the group, but then, you know, there are all sorts of patterns happening. And then, you know, this way you kind of deepen your knowledge of how these activities could be adapted, changed. And so this is really interesting for me in how you specifically approach this work, that, you know, it's not just that it's yet another curriculum just outside of the classroom, but it's something which is very flexible, and also depending on the specific young people that you interact with. You know, I remember you explaining that these things have to be adapted depending on the interests, the skills, the the capacity and the general energy, so to say. So so basically, like this kind of like the point I'm trying to make, that this essentially, I feel that you're approaching your work in a similar way as I do, which is more like a practice. So it's not just the job that you do in a way that you've been trained for, but it's essentially you bringing yourself into it, and you come out from the experience enriched because you've learned something yourself. So am I kind of right to a degree, or am I making this up? How do you feel about this sort of like dynamic relationship, and also learning back from kids?
So it is incredible that once I'm given the opportunity to work with anyone, it doesn't matter whether they're children, whether they're adults, anyone, I start getting ideas, and I will put those ideas straight into practice if I can. So I'm also part of a group called ANWOB, which is a new way of being. And we're looking at how to build really resilient communities and how to help people build their own communities. So even in spaces where they're not given the opportunity to have a physical presence and come together, we want to encourage that. And I'm really interested in even simple games like, okay, so we get 5 groups, we get 5 people in each group, and we say to them, right, you're going to be talking to each other just about how you feel about your own community. And as part of that, we then want you to, maybe write a short play, maybe think about the characters who are in your community. Now, that's just me. I've just taken that straight out of my head. But we've got all these ideas in terms of like, sit and draw the person without looking at them. And this is an exercise that I did when I went to a conference with my uncle about the importance of happiness and the index of happiness. And it's looking at your partner or drawing your partner without looking at the paper. So you're just looking at their face and you're just drawing. And that in itself is a really interesting practice. But every time I come back from a lesson, yes, I may be exhausted, but I'm also exhausted because my brain has been doing so much work. It's been doing so much work, which is, one, I don't want to give these children incorrect information. And if the information is incorrect, I want them to double check it. I want them to fact check it. But also, it is based on the fact that I've been pinging off them. So I've been taking an idea and I've been going, all right, let's do this. Let's just see what happens. So something I did recently, which was about communication. And I just said, right, what we're going to do, we're going to stand around in a circle. Now, I find the circle really important. I've always thought it was important. I got introduced to it when I was doing my acting classes. And the circle is important because everyone can see everyone and everyone is equal. And I often say to the children, regardless of their age, make space so that everyone is included. And this can lead to some people falling over backwards and things because they're not looking what they're doing when they move back. Or it might be that they cluster in because they want to be closer to me in the middle. But I try not to put myself in the middle. I try to put myself also inside the circle, so I'm part of it. And then say, right, so we're going to communicate within the circle. And first of all, and what I did one session was I said, right, we're going to each say our name and we'll say one thing about ourselves. And that's very simple. A lot of people can do that. And that's always interesting as well, because then you get people who you discover don't want to speak publicly, because essentially that's what they're doing in that moment. So then you're like, okay, well, that's not for everyone. I understand that. But what if they don't have to use their voice? What if they then use sign language? So then that allows me to think about, okay, animals, when they're communicating, they don't communicate in a way that we understand, but they do communicate in a way that we can understand. So if I get them to do things like sign language, it puts in their mind, hold on a minute, there's other ways to communicate, and we're communicating all the time. if we sit up straight, if we cross our arms, if we open our arms, all of these things. Now, they will learn these anyway as they go through. But what my point was in that is try and bring yourselves down to a point where there is no noise. Because also in that space where there's no noise, they get to hear the birds. They get to hear themselves. They get to hear each other. And so often children's play is way up here. You know, it's really loud. It's full of joy. It's full of joy. And it's full of just an exorbitant kind of expression of themselves. You know, they don't think about what it means. They just do it. But what I wanted them to do was to come around in a circle and each come up with their own sign name. And that's really interesting because it's what people then choose as their sign name. Now, some of it might be insignificant and some of it might be an example of what that person's actual key attribute is. So they might choose, that I draw. I had one person recently, that was their thing. That was I draw. But somebody else did this, you know. And it's really interesting that children want to create a form of sign for themselves. Or I say they want to, I encourage them to, but they take it on board really quickly, like they do with anything. You know, I'm often concerned by the fact that people say, my child's really interested in this. Yeah, were they before you put them involved in it? Before you introduced them to it? Were they really intrigued? Were they, you know, you've had to lead them and then they're the ones who have gone, this is really good. I like this. Yeah, no, I want to come again, or, or I want to be here. Or maybe they're not even given a choice to be there. They're just told to be there the whole time. And I find that's really interesting as well, because that's not playful. That's restrictive. And there are times where I'm like, okay, I've been allowing them to play, but now I want them to come back. Now, some of that is because I've been told to play or to encourage them to learn. So part of that is restrictive. And it's much better for me personally when I'm able to say to them, right, play. And then as part of your play, I'm going to come around and see what you're doing, because that's where the real interest can lie. And part of forest school is all supposed to be about play. But it has to be, in order for us to be providing a service, so many people will say, well, what activities have you done with the children? Well, that's a very interesting question. I mean, they haven't been doing nothing. You know, I was once asked, this was a really interesting experiment for me. I was once asked in my drama class to sit on a chair and do nothing. Do you know how hard it is to sit on a chair and do nothing in front of an audience? Like, you naturally want to do something which is performative because you feel like you're being put on the spot. So as soon as you're in that moment, you're like, okay, well, I am doing an activity. And often the children will say, what are we doing today? Well, we're doing this. This is what we're doing. You know, this what you're doing right now, this is part of the activity. I'm learning through you whilst you're learning through me. And that is the most important thing as far as I'm concerned. Even if I did nothing, and it's the same with the community venture, even if we do nothing and then we don't give them a great talk, we give them the opportunity to meet people they'd never have met before and have that conversation. And like I said, where it's just an idea, think about other characters in their community because I'm very interested in psychodynamic therapy as well, having been through the process myself. I think that's part of my enrichment. A lot of people say it takes a great deal of courage, and I think it does, because you do have to express and experience so many things which perhaps you buried. But one thing always I find really interesting with any kind of psychodynamic therapy or counselling or anything, the thing that's at the front of your mind is the thing which will express itself. So if you say to a child, what did you enjoy most about Christmas? The first thing that they say, and now bear in mind that others might copy each other as they go around the circle, but the ones who have really got a sense of what they enjoy, their first thing that they say is really going to be the first thing that they really enjoyed. So me just being with 30 people and asking them what's important, what is important, that is where they're given the opportunity to be themselves. And a lot, as I said before, play is all about being yourself. And as long as you're allowed to be yourself, so many things are possible. It's when you're not allowed to be yourself. So when I'm having conversations with my friends and they'll say something like, oh, you know, I feel like I'm a bit muddled at the moment. Why have they used that word? Why have they expressed themselves in that term? You know, like, that's when I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about why you feel muddled. Because why have you used the word muddled? You know, let's explore that. Let's see what's possible. And sometimes they're resistant to it because they're not willing to engage. But really, if they were happy to be like, you know what, I'm going to see this as not being serious. And I think that's part of it as well. We view life as being extremely serious. When the birds, the animals, they don't see it as being extremely serious. They just see it as being an organic process. Some of it, you know, we were talking just before the recording about how a group of people together would have to build something which is worthwhile, like a structure. And actually tomorrow in my lesson, I'm probably going to be doing structure building with the children because it's a great example for them to do teamwork, team building, and use whatever resource they've got. So it might be that when there's nothing, I've just thought about this, it might be when there's nothing, they build a structure using themselves. You know, it could be really interesting to see what's possible. And I love the fact that even in this conversation, my brain is sparking other ideas because I'm so open to this idea of play. But no, so if you've got a group of people and you said, right, we're going to build this structure, what is going through their mind at the time? Are they thinking, this is really serious, we have to build something worthwhile? Or are they allowing themselves to say, well, we've got certain things, we think this has worked before, we've seen an element of it when we were in our play stage, if we were allowed to play, so therefore maybe we apply that. And I think I was reading a book called Sapiens, and it talks about how we're a lot more specialized now. So we are, I have to remember the quote exactly. We've got, cities don't make strong communities. I think that was the main purpose of it. Cities don't make strong communities. They make strong individuals. That's it. They make strong individuals. And individuals need specific skill sets. Whereas communities, they need a whole range of skill sets. They need to have a variety of skills. Now, our ancestors would have had so many more skills than we have now. They would constantly be evolving those skills, because if they didn't, they would die. They wouldn't be able to survive. So I think when it comes to building a structure, they probably had already got so many ideas because they'd already been allowed to play, and they'd already thought. And I've been reading a fantasy book recently, but it's so based in things like Celtic myth. And I often go back to, and in a lot of my work, I go back to this sort of preternatural stage, or like our ancestors, basically, somewhere where it was much more simpler. And I often feel like my mind is set towards more simple times. And they're given, even as children, tasks like, well, go and kill the rabbits. Go and, do something which is important, but at the same time, you've learned it through play. If you watch any animal, their parents will watch them learning how to hunt their siblings, or learning how to fight with their siblings, because they're then learning all of the skills that they need to adapt, to be able to be the adults that they need to be. And I think that's so often the case that we don't allow that to happen, because we are expected within these very rigid structures to say, well, we've got all these children of people who are in cities who cannot look after their children all the time. So we have to put them under somebody else's care and somebody else's jurisdiction for a certain period of time. And in that time, they're given certain things that they're expected to know, expected to learn, but they're also then allowed to have times of play. And I think that can get very confusing to a lot of children, because yes, they need routine, but at the same time, sometimes, like my nephew, where he's like, well, why have I not got Lego in my class? Why am I not doing that? And it becomes quite difficult for them, because then they're like, well, I was in my play mode and now I'm in my learning mode. So why am I separating the two? And I think that can become quite jarring for some people as well, because then they're like, well, I don't want to learn and I'm not playing, and I enjoy play, but I don't enjoy learning. And I think that's really difficult, because we get into that stage, and I know I can be guilty of it as well sometimes. You're sitting down in front of a spreadsheet, which you don't really want to do, and you're going back to that mindset of, this is learning. This is the point that I don't really like. This is rigid structures. This is things that I have to complete in a very rigid way. Whereas my natural sense is keep being creative, keep changing, keep doing things. And I think that sometimes that in itself can cause a degree of frustration, because I can bounce from one thing to the next. Now, that might be my own, the way that my brain works. But I also find all of that extremely fascinating, and I continue to be intrigued by it. And I think that's part of the play element as well. It's being intrigued and being willing to change and willing to adapt. Because, as I say, play doesn't have a rigid framework. It flows from one thing to the next. So a child could be swinging another child round, and then another child comes up, and before you know it, they've created a line together where they're then weaving in and out of other children. It's totally chaos. But in that chaos, there are moments of like, oh yeah, this is what we want to do, and we want to keep doing this. And often
exactly like these insights, right, where the discovery has happened. I just wanted to make a quick interjection that basically I want that people listening to this clearly build the parallel that while most of the time you speak about children playing, like it's the very same principle that applies to adults as well. So I just want to emphasize that this is like a general principle in life. It's not just limited to how children operate, and it doesn't end after reaching a certain age. And also, one additional point I wanted to make, because a lot of these activities, they are, I think you used that expression in one of our previous conversations, that they are embodied learning. And so what that means is, like my kind of plain intuitive understanding of it is that what I've noticed in myself as I've gradually been moving away from crafts, manual things, painting, woodworking, and moving to doing everything in digital, where you can paint on the screen, you can sculpt in 3D. Everything is possible. You can then print it in 3D, and the object just materializes in the reality. But I did a little bit of reading, and essentially, like, humans don't learn purely in a mental way, like things have to be done, and still it's like, even if you're doing it digitally, it still happens because it's outside of your body. But I think that like I, in my adult life, like returning to writing on paper, doing some woodworking, have discovered that there is the just purely the fact that you're engaging more of your senses, your hands perform different actions than just tapping on the keyboards, that it's expanding you, and probably some new neural networks are growing on, or something of that sort. But so I'm trying to connect your kind of lived experience with learning through embodied arts, and how specifically background in theater that to my understanding involves higher kind of awareness of your presence in the space and relationship to people, objects, the ability to kind of inhabit the character while also being still aware that there is audience that's perceiving you in a certain way, and to be kind of expressive in a way that they can actually receive, that it's not that essentially being able to kind of externalize the internal state. Like that's how I would define what acting appears to me. So something that I don't have any kind of training or experience. So would you be happy to kind of touch on this specific, so embodiment, and how experience with theater can be helpful, thinking that perhaps for a person doing some adult having experience doing some workshop in acting, potentially trying the open mic, that can be actually benefit them.
That is a very interesting. Whilst you were saying that, I was thinking about how little I've actually done on the stage in the last 10, 15 years, and how I've been on the stage working backstage. So that's that's what I have been doing for many years. But really all of the stuff that I did as a young person, and the stuff that I was encouraged to do by when I was 11, and since then up until when I left university, where there's a very interesting thing that happens, I think, with a lot of people with university, which is, and there's a person who's very well known, Terry Pratchett, who has a great quote, which is, you go to university thinking you know practically everything, and you leave knowing you know practically nothing. I came out of university, and I really had, even though I'd studied theatre studies, we hadn't done a lot of acting all the time. I found like I'd been restricted somewhat. We'd done quite a bit of performance, but we hadn't really been pushed all the time to be acting as such. And we weren't doing acting classes all the time, but we were engaged in a performative ability and a performative aspect. And I didn't really continue in the vein that I wanted to, which was to be an actor, have my own theatre company. And now I'm being allowed to have that performative aspect. And I'm really intrigued by the opportunity to lead perhaps adults in some form of acting class. What does an acting class do? It allows people to present themselves in a way that doesn't take themselves too seriously. And I think that is the important part. And it allows them to adopt another character. And I think that's kind of the same when you go out onto stage. Now, for me, going onto stage is very natural. A lot of people say, oh, wow, you've got a lot of courage to do that. But to me, it's like walking into a shop. It's literally like second nature to want to be there to want to say what I've got to say, and then leave, or be there and just be present. I mean, I could quite happily, as I said to you before, you said, oh, what would you be happy to talk about? Well, I'm happy to talk about everything. And I'm happy to do it for a prolonged period of time, until I feel like people aren't getting something from it. And I think that's part of the point as well with acting, is you have to be comfortable in kind of distancing yourself from yourself for a short period of time and saying, well, normally I might not feel comfortable, but right now I feel very comfortable. And a lot of acting is essentially a physicalization of a different mode. And funnily enough, it's like a new way of being. It's like a different operation that you're performing. And when I was doing theatre studies, I found that you have to be an athlete. You have to treat your body like an athlete. If you can, you've got to try and get the most out of your body. So really good actors are very physically fit. They've got a great control of their diaphragm. They've got a great control of their breathing. And I was talking to a friend about this just yesterday. We don't breathe naturally. If you watch a baby breathe, they breathe very naturally. They know when they take an in-breath, their stomach expands. And when they take an out-breath, their stomach goes inside. We don't do that all the time. We spend a lot of time breathing through our mouth, and we don't spend a lot of time focusing on our breathing. In acting, you have to be focusing on your breathing. You have to be thinking kind of almost moment to moment. What am I doing? As you said, where am I supposed to be? And actually, I think I found that quite difficult as an actor, because that didn't come naturally to me. Whereas when I'm just given the space to walk onto stage and do my open mic, I'm no longer being a character. I no longer have to remember my lines. I have to remember some of my lyrics that I've put forward. But actually, no one is relying on me for a cue. So I can just do almost whatever I want. And as long as and I think we all have to be aware, and I think I am aware anyway. And it's the same with children, that you have to have an understanding of social cues. So if I was to go on stage and they were expecting me to do my singing, and then suddenly I started giving a really long treatise about, how I see the current government going, they're going to lose interest. But there has to be a degree of, this is what is expected. This is what I'm being asked to talk about. And this is what I'm being asked to engage in. Now, ironically, it might be straight away from the point of what you asked me, but it's kind of the same, because on stage as an open mic artist, you just take yourself and you take whatever material you've got and just you're very honest with people. And I think that's really part of acting as well. There's a degree of deception because you're playing another character, but actually it's very honest, because you're saying, well, there's no screen, there's nothing. And actually that's one thing I've always put forward when my friends have said, oh, I'm going to do film, no, I'm going to do this. I've always thought theatre engages in a way that nothing else can. So Brecht was a great example of this, in the sense that he would do plays and he would encourage people to get up and question what was going on stage. And I think that's massively important, because once you can get up and question someone, you can start to change the narrative. And that's too much of what's happening now in our world is people not being able to engage and change the narrative, and it disempowers them. As soon as you give someone the opportunity, and I do this again with the children, where I say, we've played this game, now do you want to change the rules? And how do you want to change the rules? And I start to get them to think about the democratic process. And that's also part of being in the circle, because I know that from our history, our elders, or the elders, would have to gather together in a way that was equal, expected as being equal, even though there's always character dynamics, there's always shifts in character and power plays going on. But everyone comes together and they're all given a voice. And if no one is given a voice, or if someone starts talking over somebody else, that's when it's really important for the other person or people to be able to say, you're not allowing them to speak. You're being disruptive. And those are the important things, because children also see that. I've had so many children who start taking the role of the guardian. They're the ones that step in and go, Dave has asked for quiet. Why is everyone not being quiet? And I start to wonder and think, is there a future for them where they're going to be someone who does take responsibility for people? Are they going to be the policeman? Are they going to be the ones who, as a doctor, are going to be making key decisions? Because already they're starting to show leadership qualities. And I will always push and encourage some leadership qualities. And again, this is the thing with acting, because you're going to have your lead role, but your lead role is absolutely he's dependent on everyone else doing their part. And sometimes I've seen lead roles and lead people get really frustrated when they don't have that support from the rest of their cast, because they're like, well, you're not doing your part, you missed your line. And I think that's part of a pressure when you are really engaged as an actor, is you have that pressure of, I don't want to get it wrong. And this is where it might be important, and I don't want to make mistakes. Whereas when you're doing open mic, or when you're in a band or something, band's slightly different actually, because everyone is supposed to be very tight together. You watch band members, they're like, okay, he's going to be hitting that klaxon, so he's going to be doing that cowbell. I need to be ready to do my bass line. I need to be ready to do my rhythm guitar, and then the vocalist needs to come in. So all of those elements have to work together. And maybe that's why I like my open mic, because it's just me. So if I get it wrong, I get it wrong. There are no mistakes. I just move forward and I just say, I didn't do it right that time. I do it right the next time. But it's very basic level. The acting side of things for me is that expression of movement and the expression of voice. So how many different ways can we use our voice? How do we vocalize whatever is internal? And I think that makes the difference. And I think that's very natural to us as a species, the vocalization. And I feel like a lot of the time when people can't vocalize, they start to become overly aggressive, or they start to go through certain echo chambers because they're no longer able to voice things. And we see so often now groups, you go.
So just to clarify, do you mean the ability to actually put it in words, or actual making sound is what you mean?
That in itself is really interesting,
using the voice.
Because I feel like even people who would want to get angry are not being allowed to. It would be very socially strange if young people who were really aggressive suddenly walked out into the middle of the street and just screamed at the top of their lungs, and really let out what is essentially like a guttural explosion of emotion. But I think that's actually really important. There's all sorts of different therapies like scream therapy where you can just go and you can just open up. You can just explode. Whatever is inside you can be expressed. So it doesn't really matter if it's words, but words are also really important because, as I said before, they allow us to frame things in a box that we have put in that box for a reason. So we're saying, that's what I'm not happy with. That's what I'm not happy with. That's what I'm not happy with. And we're able to allow somebody else to understand. Whereas a scream, well, no, funnily enough, we all understand a scream, or we all understand rage. That's something I've often found it really interesting, how you get groups of people and you'll have 4 or 5 different laughs, but then you'll go and you'll listen and you'll be like, that person's got a very similar laugh to that other person. Where have they picked up these laughter patterns from? And is it just a very natural thing?
So I would like now to speak specifically about the music you're working on, where it comes from. And you did say before that you kind of respond through these songs to the situation around you. And I heard somewhere the expression that we make art to metabolize our human experience. And is that kind of the place where it comes from, and you know, the meaning that it has for you, or is it something else? And yeah, please, you know, before we started recording, you did mention that you're now expanding the way you be engaging with music. So please share a bit more about that and why you decided to make that move.
Okay. Metabolizing our, how did you put it?
Metabolizing our human experience.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely what music does, and I think that's what most art forms do, because they are an expression of our soul, and I don't, regardless of what people think about a soul, for me a soul is our being. So regardless of what that form takes, you know, I think most atheists would probably still, I mean, I've had various journeys along the way in terms of my spirituality, but I think most atheists would still say that there's a being and there's a sense of a person, a character of a person, and that's all I really think our souls are. And that's why I think our souls will live on, because other people then remember them and other people take them forward. But I also think that every part of us, I do say this in one of my songs, every part of us never goes anywhere else but back into this earth. As far as I know, Hunter S. Thompson and perhaps a few unfortunate monkeys who were fired into space have had their remains in space. Now, Hunter S. Thompson was a massive inspiration to me. The work that he was doing in America and the ideas that he was starting to explore and the way that he was challenging what was going on in America was massively important to me. I used to watch Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas pretty much every night before I was going to bed, because I was just really intrigued by this man. Now, I did like, you know, I was interested in his levels of intoxication and why he wanted to go off on this trip. And so much of, I think, the artist is this journey into the unknown. It's this sense of, I don't know every part, but I am interested to know what's next. And I feel like that's where the joy and the organic processes within a band, because until you're there with a person playing an instrument and then banging out a riff or them like hitting a note which you'd never heard before. You know, when Geezer Butler first played that note in Iron Man, people were like, what's that? You know, when Lead Belly just took the different chord structure and did something slightly different, people were intrigued. People were like, never heard that before. And I'm really intrigued by the pause in something, the sudden movement of something, the stillness, the start, you know, all of these things are really important to me. And unfortunately, sometimes when I'm doing my singing, I kind of just jump through and I just keep going. And that's because I know certain patterns, but I'm always intrigued to learn new patterns. So yeah, it is very much for me sort of a expression of self. And all of my songs are about either our lives, our ancestors, or the lives of our ancestors, but also what is important to me. So currently I am bewildered by the state of the world. And I'd like people to have an understanding, an idea of they don't have to be bewildered. They don't have to be in fear for a start. You know, when I finished my open mic night the other night, we were talking about the next one, and someone said, well, next month is St. George's Day. And I was like, it would be interesting, wouldn't it, if someone was to write a song about George and the Dragon? And I felt like he was looking at me at the time, because that's sometimes what my kind of work goes towards. It goes towards this folklore, it goes towards spirituality, it goes towards another life. One of my first songs, which is called Should I Have Been, is that question of all the different paths I could have walked. And I don't know what those paths are. And I still don't know what those paths are, because there's something in the future, but I don't know what it is. Something might happen, and suddenly I'm placed in a position where I'd never have seen myself before, but someone's given me that opportunity. I didn't start doing forest school after theatre studies because I didn't know it existed. But once someone put a platform in front of me and said, Dave, would you be interested in doing this? I was like, yeah, definitely. Because I'm being able to reach children. I'm able to talk to children on their level and kind of start to form a sense of myself through them. So that it has in itself informed my music as well, because then, as you said before, it's that playfulness. So whenever I get a song, and the idea that someone went, oh yeah, so someone might write a song about George and the Dragon. So I'm now writing a song about George and the Dragon. What does that mean for me? Then really, it means George was this character who we're not really sure of. We know he was a martyr. We know he was a Christian. We know he died, and he was given veneration and sainthood. We don't really know about his actions. We don't. This idea of slaying the dragon is. Did we have dragons? We don't know. There might have been some dinosaurs or something still around, large creatures that were a threat, but they were slain. Now, for me, the real dragons are fear, doubt, sadness, war, poverty, hunger, famine. All of these are all dragons that we have to slay. And so in my next song, it's about that. It's about who are the people going to be that are going to step up and kill these dragons. Who are the people going to be who are going to make a difference and try and put a spear in a dragon tomorrow? It doesn't matter how they do it. It just matters that they're going to do it. And that's what I try and live my life as best I can, with this idea of there's someone next door who might be in pain. How can I help them? And I'm always interested by the idea of time and how much time we've got and where we invest that time. Now, because of the way my brain works, again, it kind of sometimes flips from one thing to the next. But in my songs, they're giving somebody else, I like to think, the inspiration. And I think that's what's so key about folk music, is it's giving someone the inspiration to do something different that they'd never have thought of before, or challenge them to do something which they might not do otherwise. And that's why it's important to me. And I've got several songs about our being and people we've lost, because those are the ones. They need to be remembered. They need to be remembered in the right way. You know, why did someone die in the trenches in World War I? Who was it for? What was their life before they came to the trenches? What was, when I was young, I went to EAPX. I was absolutely shaken by the amount of destruction that had been caused. It really shook me. The next day I took the day off school because I was blown away. I looked at these graves, these thousands of graves, and I thought, there has to be something. There has to be something from this. So I sat down, and in my day off, the teachers were really happy actually, because in my day off, I wrote 10 or 15 poems. I just wrote poems. I just wrote an expression to say that I hadn't been able to cope. And this is what I'd seen, and this is what I had experienced. And now I've taken that song and I've performed it, and it's got a really interesting response. People really like it. But again, it's remembering those people who otherwise might not have been remembered. So, yeah, it really is a metabolism of our, or it was a metabolism, wasn't it? Yeah, it's an expression of our being. I mean, everything that we do is always, should be an expression of self. And that's when I get really frustrated, when people aren't allowed to express themselves and people aren't allowed to be, because it's one of the things that I've got an incredible life coach now. And he talks about the importance of being and just being. And for whatever reason, a lot of people don't allow themselves to be. Well, I was talking to a friend just yesterday about an Uber driver that he'd had. And he asked the Uber driver, well, the Uber driver, first of all, asked him, said, how much are they charging for this ride? And now, that seems a bit, why are you asking? I should be able to ask you that question, but you shouldn't really be asking me that question. You're stepping over what's the socially expected borders here, or boundaries. And he continued on having the conversation. And it turned out, because my friend said to him, well, what do you enjoy in life? And the person said, money. Well, if that's all you want out of life, you're not going to get anywhere, because money isn't really, it can fulfill a lot of things, but it's not the fulfillment of your being. It's not going to take you forward and make you a better person. It's just going to give you a platform to do things. Now, I'm very privileged in that I don't have to worry about certain things, but I have to worry about other things, the state of the world. And so I'm very interested in trying to metabolize whatever is in me to inform somebody else's life, whether that's my drawings, whether that's my games, because that's another thing which is really important to me, is this idea of playing games and encouraging perhaps people who don't find it easy to talk, and just saying, let's play a game together. Because I think it was Nietzsche who said you can learn a lot. Again, please fact check this. They said you can learn a lot through an hour's play with someone, because there's modes, there's things that express themselves which wouldn't otherwise express themselves. So yes, we're just playing a card game, but what am I learning about you as a person? What am I really like? What's involved here? What does it mean to you? And I just find our journey as a species incredibly fascinating, and I always will. I don't think there was a time where I wasn't, really. And I still continue to find all of it remarkable. I was talking to somebody as well about coincidences, and he's a writer. And it just so happened that we were at the temple together, this Hare Krishna temple, and I was there with my friends. And I said, there's some really funny coincidences that are happening here, because also his name was Sanj, and that in, I think Hindu, maybe Hindu, means bearer. Now my second name, Christopher, is bearer, or means bearer, and so Christ bearer, which is what I was brought up to be. Now, the question is, well, am I supposed to bear Christ, or am I supposed to bear the ideas of Christ? That's important to me. I grew up as a Christian. I grew up as, having certain faiths. But really, they were the groundwork for me to be a better person, or try and be a better person. And I honestly believe that. That's not an inflated sense of ego. Now, I know we're all driven by ego, because ego is I. We only know really I. And sometimes I hold myself, I'm like, I feel like I'm pushing myself forward more than I need to here. And I need to let the other person have their ego. They need to be present. And it formed my being. So when I was talking to this person about coincidences, he then said, I don't see coincidences anymore. I see synchronicities. And I really like that. And it's like, yeah, synchronicities, it makes a lot of sense. But I'm always questioning this idea of coincidence. My uncle, who did a lot of work with adult education, although he wasn't a religious man, he'd been brought up in a religious family, and he also found coincidences very interesting. And I continue to find them absolutely fascinating. And the idea of perhaps there's more to this life, we don't know. But whether it needs to be narrow, that's where I struggle, because that doesn't allow for that freedom. And freedom should be everything. And I would encourage everyone, doesn't matter what you're doing, what you've come from, to try and be free. Because there was an amazing quote that I read, which was, even if you're in prison, if you're incarcerated, there is something that no one can ever take away from you, which is your thoughts. Now, we're stepping into some very strange ground in terms of like technology and stuff. And people are really concerned that they are going to be able to influence our thoughts and change our thoughts. And I really hope that isn't the case. And there have been times where people have been indoctrinated. You know, when I first learned about re-education programs, I was shocked. I was like, wait, they brainwash these people. They try and get them to think a certain way, and they get them to behave a certain way. But I don't think they ever really, I mean, they probably can, unfortunately. But taking away someone's being, I don't think it's possible. I think people continue to have, well, it doesn't matter how much they fight it. You know, you get people really in the depths of the doldrums of depression, and they're trying to take everything they can, drugs, whatever. And I don't think they ever really give up their being. I don't think they ever really give up their soul. You know, I think even in our last moments, whenever they come, there's still something. I think even people with dementia, perhaps, still have an essence, an understanding of themselves, an understanding of their being. Because people with dementia, from what I've learned and understood, they go back to quite a childlike state at times. And they remember things right from their very beginning. They remember when they were 5, you know, so they can't understand what's going on here and now, but they can remember going to a sweet shop when they were 5. And I find the essence of our being and our brain so incredible. So never give up your freedom. That's the most important thing we've got. Freedom to express yourself, freedom to play. And that is really the crux of play, is this freedom. Because we're saying to children, you do what you want to do. You express yourself how you want to express yourself. We're only here as adults to make sure that you're safe. And even that is a strange parameter, because it says you've hurt yourself. No? Okay. But to what degree? What degree are we willing to let children hurt themselves and be hurt, so that actually they become more resilient and stronger as a result? As I said before the interview, I could probably talk at length as well about how I perceive their environment in which they're allowed to play. And I am conscious of time. But if you want me to expand upon that, I can do. But also, I mean, so we've had some really good conversations, Piotr. And I don't know if you're happy for me to ask you a few questions.
Yes, please. I mean, this is this open format. Go ahead. Let's flip it around.
So we've had some, as I said, really interesting conversations, and this has been me talking a lot, which sometimes, as I said, this sense of I is not everything. There's a shared space here. So I would be really interested to know what your thoughts, your reflections are on what I've been saying, but also, I mean, in our conversations, we did give ourselves each other a lot more time to express and share ideas. So I'd really like to hear from you what you talked about the crafting and how important that was to you. But how important now is the idea of play and actually even the exploration of performance? How does that feature in your future, do you think?
So as you might have noticed, that the theme of the conversation wasn't incidental. So it's not just that I basically noticed that there's something interesting in your approach in the work that you're doing, but that this is something that interests me directly. And probably the best example on the play has been I think I can count from August last year that I got serious and committed about recording some songs, and basically I started approaching it more like work than play. So basically, because I have the knowledge of all the software, I know how to do everything. I can basically create a practically professional setup, but like it's not the point. Like, through the various experiences, I came to conclusion that it's actually jamming that I like the most at this point, and to actually being able to flow with the song and improvise is what's interesting for me. And the biggest, I think, sort of reframe that occurred to me is that I was viewing that as a kind of exercise, practice, musical sketches, but not actual music. And so actually recognizing that probably at this stage, this is the music that I make, which is full of mistakes, error, slips, and it's not necessarily polished, but this is what's fun for me to make. And then setting up, a several day long, multi-hour long recording session in a dark room, which I did over the Christmas break, was probably like the worst experience in these like 6 or so months, and it just wasn't fun. So
Can I stop you there?
Yeah,
why,
of course.
Why did you not find it fun? I mean, you'd set everything up how you wanted to have it, and then you were viewing it too much like work, or you were...
Yes, exactly. So I was pushing too much for the preconception I had of what music has to be, and instead of actually like letting it happen the way which is natural for me. And so very much that's where I relaxed. I stopped pressing myself that I have to release first song at the end of 2025, an album ready before the end of 26. It's like that will happen, but what's more important for me, and I mean you've been speaking about this, that you also teach patience. So actually I started teaching myself that the results will arrive, and because I'm not obliged to make it happen, this is not how I make a living. And so I want this to be not forced, because I mean then you kind of get in the challenge that it's like if you don't set any kind of deadline, if you don't have any goal, then will it happen at all, right? You kind of have to have more or less like a direction prescribed where you're going, but then whatever happens, and so like seeing how even aesthetically it's changing, and how I'm opening up that maybe like this is not some rock music that I'm doing here, but it's going to be more acoustic guitar, who knows. Like this is also quite surprising that I'm becoming more relaxed about the aesthetics, and above anything, just surprising myself with the results, seeing what stands out to me as interesting, and following that. So really, this has been a big shift, and the best feedback I got from my partner, so that it's like you're not like publishing your jams on SoundCloud. This is your music at the stage where you're at. So that pretty much helped me kind of reframe it, and focus on what actually matters, which is again having fun doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also challenge you in talking about like a framework. Do an open mic night. We did say it before we started recording, but really, if you can, go up on stage, take it to the people, and see what they think, and because the emotion that you get from someone else appreciating your work, even if they don't talk to you about it afterwards, it's giving you a sense of encouragement, and even if it doesn't give you encouragement, you might then be like, well, why didn't they like it? What could I do differently? But I don't think that will happen. I mean, if you go to the right open mic night, now obviously there's no guarantee that you're going to go to the right one, but most of the time, every open mic night I've been to, there's a real spirit of community. You might have some noise in the background, but just do it, because you're challenging yourself. You're allowing yourself to be free. You're allowing yourself to say, I've got this. What is it? What does it look like to other people? One of my friends is always kind of blown away by the fact that I'm able to say, I haven't quite finished this song, but I'm going to do it for you anyway, and then see what happens. It's that freedom, because there's no expectation on yourself then either. You've done something, but you're like, I've got this, but I don't know what's next. And that's part of play, as I say.
So I guess it's important to have a witness, right, of the process that it's happening, and kind of makes it real to the degree, getting it out into the world and sharing.
Because that also might be why, when you were just in your very small space, right, and you're just doing it for yourself and trying to get it perfect, you haven't really at that time got you haven't got a sounding board, or you haven't got. There's something about when you do something live, you see the response from the people that you're doing it for. So then you're like, okay, well, that's not working. So what's the next bit that I do to make it work? And some people get very, very nervous, and they start to say things like, oh, no, whoops, and sorry, and don't, just go with the flow, literally, just like, oh, yeah, just hold on a second, I'll get there, and it's being able to say that, it's being able to say, all right, I don't know what happens next, but as long as you're aware of that, we're on the same wavelength, because then people hopefully will give you the time. And I really do encourage that sense of wanting to be playful, and doing it for yourself, as you say, you're starting to do, which is brilliant.
I mean, at this point, the podcast is very much the first platform where I put myself for the first time in, on the other side of the camera, and it's not so much maybe artistically I'm expressing myself here, but there is a world view that I bring into this conversation. There are ideas, philosophy, like personal philosophy. I developed in through life. So it's still an extension of myself and the way that I express myself, as you were saying before.
Yeah. And it might be that you want to. Yeah, so we were talking about the physicality of things. It might be that in the future you want to do this on a more open platform. You want to come along to one of the ANVOB sessions when we start to actually get going and talk to people, and be able to say, what is it that what is it that you want? Because that might drive more of your expression of self, or whatever it is that that next bit. But yeah, I mean, I'm really honoured, to be honest, that you've given me this space. And when we first had our conversations, yeah, I know you've said that, but it's a pleasure for me as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for acknowledging that, because half of the time I've also been thinking that it's like all the people that I invite here, it's more like they feel like they're making a favor to me, and yeah, it's great to hear that you also appreciate being given the stage space to speak.
Yeah. It's I think I said it to you before, but I don't think you can appreciate the value that you give to somebody else by giving them the opportunity to speak openly about whatever they want to speak about for the time that they are speaking. It means a lot to me, because it allows me almost to reinforce my own ideas about what it is that I'm doing, and to say, well, somebody else cares. Somebody else cares enough to want to share it with somebody else. So maybe what I'm doing is the right thing. Maybe what I'm doing is going in the right direction.
Definitely.
I know. Well, you say definitely. Someone else might say otherwise. It all depends on the frame and the being of the person, what they've been.
Of course, there are endless points of views. So many people there that we can expect to agree with everyone, but there's place for everyone, all the ideas.
And then the discussion as well. That's what I'm most interested in, is the discussion around discussion. We had a really interesting debate the other night, and afterwards I said to my friend, it felt like you were outnumbered, and I don't want that to be the case. I'd like to have another discussion where we've all got a chance to speak, because then maybe there's a chance that you'll come out the other side with more of a revelation than you did, than us just kind of chipping away at you slowly, which wasn't the intention. It was just to highlight, as far as I'm concerned, some of the dangers that present themselves if we don't hold our ground, and if we don't have our own space to talk and our own ability to change things. Because, as I said before, ultimately why I'm doing what I'm doing is to try and steer the ships. My uncle said to me a while ago, in order to get things to change, you have to be willing to try and divert the course of the ships, or steer people in the right kind of direction. Again, it is a very arbitrary sense of what is right. but there's also, for me, there's a spiritual sense of what is right, which kind of fits with the oneness of us all. So therefore, no judgment, no ostracization, nobody being exiled or being taken outside of a group. And you did ask me as well, kind of what was my hope for the future as well. In the terms of the freedom aspect, I'd really like to, and if I've got the courage to, because it would take an immense amount of courage, to go in and work with prisoners, because those are people who, by society, have been told that they can't have freedom. They're not allowed it. And I would really like to go into a prison setting and explore with them what is possibly their chance of freedom, even if it's up here. Because they might not have that opportunity otherwise, especially if they've got a life sentence or something. But that in itself will provide and has so many challenges, because they're no longer children, they're adults who are being burned time and time and time and time and time again. So they're very resistant, they're very resilient in their own way, and they've got a real pushback against anything potentially that might. I've got one friend who's got some incredible work that she does teaching prisoners English and maths, and the things that these people have never been given the opportunity to learn is horrendous. It really is. It's horrendous. The fact that they don't know simple maths because someone didn't give them the time of day. It's horrible. They just went, oh, you're complicated, you're difficult, you're a nuisance, therefore we're going to put you to one side. And then that just starts a narrative which is always destructive. And I'm really keen to stop that narrative and to stop that ability of someone saying that person is an issue. Now, funnily enough, it does happen in the class where I start to realise that one person, I'm saying their name a lot, and I'm learning their name because I'm constantly saying it because I need to address something there, some difficulty, whether that's them lashing out at another child, whether it's them endangering themselves. That could be part of a neurodivergence. But you do quickly learn certain people's names, and I'm really interested in that as well, this idea of what happens when we do start to ostracize someone. We do start to say, that person is a problem, and then the other teachers pick up on it. And that's something else that really gets my goat. Whenever I'm teaching, some teachers don't know how to respond to the teaching. They don't know how to respond to my presence being there. So they go into a mode where they just allow themselves not to engage. So they're not really engaging with the children, not really engaging with the lesson. They start to talk amongst each other. And then that shows the children that whilst other people are talking, it's okay to talk, which is a very strange thing for them to learn, because they will learn that. They will pick that up. So I would also, if there's any teachers out there listening to what I'm saying, please, this is a plea from me, please always engage with what the children are doing. It might not mean anything to you, but it means everything to them, because they're learning from you all the time. If you start using bad language around children, they're going to pick that up. Even if you're just talking to your mate in the corridor, be aware of what you're saying. I've had some classes, some adults saying things. I'm like, don't say that. Don't ever say that, because all these children are going to pick that up, and then you're going to have a whole year of children who believe that they're useless, or that they're a problem, or that they're not being good. What the heck is good? This really frustrates me, this idea of good and bad. And children are only ever influenced by behaviours around them. They're only ever influenced by stimuli around them. So that's another part of my coursework which I was looking at, which is, what does it mean when a child starts to show bad behaviour? What can you do as a teacher to make sure that it's no longer bad, and that it is actually beneficial to them, beneficial to the group. It's a social construct which says that we need people to behave in a certain way, otherwise they become detrimental and complicated to deal with. They become detrimental to our society, and they start to cause problems. Why do they cause those problems? That's what I'm always interested in.
So yeah, obviously this really highlights for me, great integrity that you basically carry with yourself. That it's not just the work with children. It expands, and it's the same principle basically. That you're spotting that the bigger sort of ecosystem we live in has its faults, and it's causing these glitches that for certain people do them disservice, if not harm, and so preventive measures and countermeasures can be taken and approached creatively as you presented, and through working with people in a specific way. There are new possibilities, right? To help them kind of have like in terms of prisoners, right? You said to have basically access to what they haven't been allowed to in terms of education. That might have, in part, also influence that they ended up, involved in criminal activities.
Yeah, and it often is the case that it is in the education system where they get failed, or they get failed at home as well. But it's part of the education system whereby what they're supposed to be able to respond to what is going on at home. It's a myriad problem. The mind boggles at how complicated the situation is. But I think what's really important is being able to address those issues. Address those issues. Yeah, I kind of, again, in a creative way, and I think that part of the response is the creative, which is that hasn't been done before. What if it can be done? So in terms of prisoners, I'm very, very interested in being allowed to say, what happens if we take them outdoors for a short period of time, at any time, And there's a real problem with a lot of prisoners where nowadays they're being given an hours of exercise every day. But that exercise is somewhere outside of their cell, but the whole time they are being treated like a prisoner. The whole time they're given no freedom, really. What does that do to someone's brain? That's what I'm always intrigued by. And it's the same with children. I was speaking to one of my friends who's an architect many years ago, and he said, I'm not making playgrounds, I'm making play spaces. I said, why do you call it that? And he said, because they're no longer on the ground. We've got some playgrounds that are being built on the top of roofs, because that's where we can house the children, that's where we can contain them for a certain amount of time. What does that look like? How do you contain a human? I've seen how we contain humans. It's barbaric. When I went to the Slavery Museum in Liverpool, horrendous. How we've ever done that to someone is laughable. Laughable in the sense that it's a ridiculous notion. It shouldn't be allowed to exist. Why are we still allowing these things to exist? No, that's the real crux of the matter for me, is what's happening politically, what's happening socially to allow these things to exist. We should not be expecting prisoners to be indoors all the time, and we should always be questioning this idea of, well, they've done wrong. They've always done wrong. They're just bad. So we lock them up. We keep them locked up, and they don't get a chance to be free anymore. Why? Because they made some mistakes? Because they didn't have a good chance in life, so you're just going to pan them? What does that say about you as a person? Why can't we give them, if someone else is willing to take the time, why can't we give them that freedom outside and say, look, I trust you? Because that's what I have to do with the children a lot of the time. I say to them, right, you're making a choice right now. I'm giving you these sticks. If you hit anyone with that stick, the stick gets taken away because you're not being responsible. You're not making a good choice. And often, I think even with prisoners now, one of my friends would disagree with me very, very strongly, because he'd say they've already made many, many bad choices and they're going to continue to make bad choices because that's but it's been invested in them. It's like a coin. It's been dropped in them every single time, and they're full of these coins. And all these coins are full of hate. All these coins are full of loathing for themselves as well as other people. And you don't give them the chance to say, go outside, maybe. Again, this is a plea almost. If there's anybody out there who's listening to this podcast who thinks that they can make a difference in helping other people to have some freedom that they didn't have before, please do get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to be able to take this forward. I don't know what that looks like. I still don't know what it looks like. There's so many options. There's so many opportunities in my life where really I'm just looking for someone to go, Dave, here's some money, right, to do what you want to do. To do what you want to do, and then go and do it. Because that is kind of how, obviously, we as people get investment, right, in the same way. So I would really like to hear from anyone who would also like to help people be free in a way that they haven't been allowed to be for many, many, many years. I got a friend, he was an acquaintance at school, and we fought all the bloody time. Excuse my language. We fought a lot. And then after high school, he went to prison for killing someone in a McDonald's. I'd really like to get in touch with that person. I still want to. I still want to get back in touch with him and say, look, mate, you made some mistakes, but that doesn't mean you're closed off with me. You're still in my heart. I still think about you because you tried. You were trying to be a good person. You just didn't make the right decisions. And that's often the case. We should give more people freedom than we actually give them. There's a hell of a lot of people stuck. There's a lot of people stuck. And the more people we have stuck, the less people we have actually living fulfilling and fruitful lives. And then the cycle continues. So, and I'm really keen, that's mostly what I'm keen on doing, is breaking cycles. Why are we perpetuating these cycles?
And this is important work, and much respect for you for taking on that path. I just quickly kind of wanted to comment on this, that sort of ties with the patience. So obviously all changes will take time, and it's one of the maybe most challenging thing is that seeing all these problems, and one can get overwhelmed and hoping that they can be removed quickly, but obviously that's not going to happen. So one of the things is also to acknowledge the fact that it's best to do what's within our range, and perhaps start in most cases with ourselves and the perimeter of like our direct kind of where we interact with the world, and that's like the foundation to anything. But said so much respect to people like you who take on missions like describe, bringing the work you do to, also to prisons.
If I can, I mean, that's the next step. I through my life coach, actually, and through a conversation I had with him, again through a synchronicity, we were talking, and I was like, I'd love to do some work in prisons, and he said, I've got a mate who does that, so I put you in touch with him. So I'm still recovering from an operation, but as soon as I'm properly well, I have every intention of getting in touch with this person and seeing what's possible, because it might be that I do hold the key to help, and I do say key with a sense of reason, which is could literally unlock a door for someone, and if I can do that, that makes all the difference to me, because I'm already then fulfilling something I've been thinking about for years, and it's been on this kind of playing on me for a long time. I've had a fear of, me being incarcerated for a long time. It's a real fear of mine. And it's a horrible thing to do to someone. Put them in a box and, let them be. Because then they're being incarcerated. Their whole being is being incarcerated. And that's all they then learn, unless they've got a chance at these freedoms. And then but hopefully, as I say, their thoughts are always free. You just don't know. That's often the way with people. You just don't know.
Oh, well, so thank you for sharing all of that, and I can only wish luck on this new endeavor. Kind of unexpected, right? How things go, and I wasn't even aware that your work takes that turn, right? And here in a conversation about play, we end up into more serious territory, but also seeing how potentially bringing play into places which are absent of play could potentially make a change. So is there kind of closing thoughts and anything you kind of like to add, summarize?
Well, it is very interesting, because when I was doing the theatre studies, a lot of people weren't going off into acting. They were going off into social work. They were going off into police. They were going off into play therapies. And I feel like over the course of the years, I'm now coming back to this idea of where can I help people rather than just entertain them. That's the important part. And maybe me working with young people. I went to a conference as part of being in forestry school with a lady called Sharon Ward, who has been absolutely instrumental in helping me be who I am now. In that she's given me the platform to go and meet you for a start. I wouldn't have been at that school had it not been for Sharon saying, I want to invest in you, Dave. I want to see you grow, and I want to give you the platform to come alongside me and help me help these children. She's an incredible. Every time I go to forest school sessions, I do remind the children that this is all possible because of Sharon. So I'd like to, commend all of Sharon's work. She's been through a lot herself, but incredible. Well, I also met a guy called Leroy, who does a thing called, it's a boxing practice. I can find out what it's called. No, it's not coming to me. He does a boxing practice whereby he goes into schools and he teaches children through the boxing, the principles of what it is to fight, and what it is to defend yourself, and what it is to be strong. And he said an amazing thing, even when, so we were each given some time to speak. And I was speaking about forest school and how important it is for children to be able to create and do things like even, making a spark, which is massive. This is just so, it just taps into something very natural in our being, this idea of, I can create spark from nothing. It's this idea of magic to them, and even to some adults. But his practice, he was talking about it, and then he was only given so long, and the microphone was switched off. But he had the presence of mind and the courage that even when he's present, when his microphone was switched off, to say, you can either build strong children or you can fix broken adults. And that is what my platform does. And I just thought that's so incredible. That was so instrumental. And I want to get back in touch with him, but it's sometimes the case with me where I don't do something, then I think too much time has elapsed, then I don't do it. We're all, obviously guilty of procrastination.
All happens to all of us.
Yeah. But go on, sorry.
So I just wanted quickly to add to the point, because it's really interesting that you mentioned that so many people kind of went to like you started acting with, went to do social work, but at the same time, because this is the place where I am, where I've been at all costs trying to make my work kind of practical and helpful to others, where ultimately, my kind of natural construction is that of artist self-expressing. And I've also learned that this is also equally important contribution. It's like, even in the speaking of music, that can appear sort of frivolous if we put it side by side to any kind of social work. But I just reflected at one point that through all my life, basically, music has been with me in good times, bad times, never left me, and it's been in many ways like a best friend that's been always there for me. So I think that it's really important to see that our work, whatever it is, can benefit others, and even if it's sort of on the surface self-centered self-expression, when shared, it becomes something also for others. So that's just one kind of viewpoint I wanted to share. And tell me if you have some thoughts on that.
I mean, it's often the way as well that I think I'm doing something inconsequential. So like I'm working backstage doing something, building a stage for someone which I'm not really going to see the effect of. I know that a lot of people are going to come and watch it. I know it's going to mean an awful lot to them. But even in doing stage work, I've been able to help so many people. I've been able to engage with so many people. In my downtime, I've gone off and I've walked around the park with someone and talked about their relationship and why it's breaking apart, and being able to be that person that can encourage them. And I've always been encouraged to be that person. Everybody has this potential to help other people, and we all do it. People might say, I'm not charitable, I don't really do much. And then you find out that often they go around to their elderly neighbour and help with the shopping. We've all, again, this is the whole thing of like good and bad. And I'd be really interested to know, even within the prison system, you've probably got some guy who is done for murder, and yet he'll be the one that will take all the post round and make sure all the other inmates are all right. Again, it's this levels of, we're not 2D characters, we're multifaceted. So you're right, I should never allow my work or whatever I'm doing to be diminished. And that's the same for everyone. Don't allow yourself to be diminished. Think about, oh, I am doing this. Now there is a question of, are we doing the right thing for the world? Well, us being here isn't always the right thing for the world. But what are we doing? I mean, we're always supporting each other in some way. We're very good at doing that. The pandemic showed that. Again, I'm amazed. In fact, it made me really emotional again, the fact that all these volunteers had come together to make sure that people were okay. You had a hall full of people who'd never met each other before, all sitting around talking, waiting for their turn, sharing jokes with the people that were then going to be doing the immunisations. And it was, look at what is possible when we have an external factor that we need to fight against. And that's something else I'd urge people to do. One of the biggest things that we've got in this country at the moment is perhaps the destabilisation of the NHS. Don't let that happen. I mean, the Labour government fought for that. They built it. And they came back from the Second World War. There's a great video that I watched with my dad, who always was the one to encourage me to do these things, and my mum, called Spirit of 45. And these people would come back from the Second World War and they thought, we've defeated fascism. We've defeated it in Europe by our actions, through our communications, our understanding of tactics, our understanding of strategy, our understanding of the importance of mobilising many, many, many men in one direction. You can't fight on several fronts. Sometimes you have to fight in one front. And if we can beat fascism, we can beat poverty. So they did. They tried to as best they could. They created the NHS. Nye Bevan was at the forehead of that, making sure that these things really made a difference to people. But before you were paying money to get services and get looked after, you were then getting it for free. None of us are perfect, but we do need to support each other more so than we're perhaps doing at the moment. There's more work to be done. There's always more work to be done. So I would urge people, in whatever form that takes, to push to do that next bit. Like I'm going to try and, I'm going to be singing that next song. Sing your next song, whatever it looks like, but make sure you slay that dragon. Like day to day, doesn't matter. Even if it's your own doubt, your own fear, slay a dragon, move on, and then slay another one. That's really like when that person has said to me on stage, someone could write a song about George and the Dragon. I had never thought about writing a song about George and the Dragon, and now I'm talking about slaying dragons with real impetus on that dragon. Could be just as something simple like, I don't feel like I can go out and see my friends. Do it. Go out and see your friends. Try do something. Because again, this whole play, you don't try, you won't know. So my life coach is very keen on this notion of the unexpected. We don't know what's going to happen in any given scenario until we put ourselves in a position where we can ask that question or do that thing. We're not going to know. I work with, and I was talking to someone about anxiety, and I didn't realise that when he was going to the bar, he'd already rehearsed like an actor 5 or 6 times the different ways that conversation could take place. I had no idea that was the level of confusion that was in his head. The lack of, and even though he could go up on the stage and he could perform, the anxiety that he had day to day about just going up and ordering a drink. Again, if I hadn't asked him, I wouldn't have known. So that would be another thing I'd say. Don't be afraid of the unknown, because the unknown is most of the time all we have. Because I can guarantee you don't know what's going to happen in 10 minutes' time. You've got no way of really knowing. I mean, I'm waiting for a parcel at the moment. That parcel may arrive, it may not. And the unknown is an incredible place to exist in. My sister, again, doing her own podcast, asked a question the other day about if. If is a massive word, often people in history are talking about, but if this had happened, if that had happened. And my history teacher, Mr. Tobin, who I talked about earlier, he said it's not the realm of history to talk about if, because it hasn't happened. We can think about what might have happened, what may have happened, but that's not really. But in life, in our real story, which is neither his or hers, by the way, it is always if. If I do this, what happens? And one of the biggest things that my life coach will put forward as well, there's several things, obviously. Again, he's giving me the tools, and he's through Anwad building something where he wants to provide everyone with tools, which is be conscious of knowing that each action doesn't have to be massive. Each action can just be this compared to, this. Don't think of it as a yawning chasm. Think of it as just the next step. Because when you think about it as the next step, that's all you've got to do. Step forward. And if you only ever step forward, well, you're going to go somewhere, right? You have to be going somewhere. God, I've got so many thoughts about all of these things that I've been talking about. But I did at one point, when I went off on I'd had an argument with my partner, and I went off on a walk. And as I was walking, I was like, where am I really going? Where are we really going? We were constantly going round and round in circles. We're sort of like, because we're, again, like as I said about our ashes and our being has only ever invested or come back into this earth. So if we're not going anywhere, we're really perfecting the art of going nowhere. So if we're going nowhere, then what does it matter what we do day to day? Because it's inconsequential. And in the same way as we're like a tiny, tiny, tiny speck in the universe. But so, to us, it's massive. It's so significant. Everything we do is so significant. But if you've got the possibility to say, well, actually, this part of my life isn't so significant, and it doesn't make a big difference. So what if I change this current course that I'm on? What could happen? And is that just a step? And if that is just a step, should I take it and move forwards rather than going round and round in circles? Because I had a choice that night. I could either have carried on walking along that canal, or got a bus and gone back to my parents, or done something else, or gone in a different direction. Or I could have gone back and made a difference and gone, I need to reconcile. Because if I don't, I'm not going to have the stability that I had before. So, again, about conscious decisions. Conscious decisions are really important. But the final thing is, we have to be, in the same way when we take that step, we have to be prepared to live with that consequence. We have to be prepared that when you go on stage or you put yourself forward, not everyone is going to like what you're doing. And if they don't like what you're doing, well, hell, that's just a really good opportunity for you to say, why don't you like what I'm saying? What's wrong with what I've just done or what I've just said? Because again, it opens the doors of communication. And again, I always come around in cycles, I find. The communication that I do with the children, and I did with the last session, it doesn't have to be verbal. It can be sign. Watch for the signs in other people. Watch for when you're making an action, what action are you creating, and what difference are you having on somebody else and yourself. You burn yourself and you go, you have a physical response, and you know that you burned yourself, and you live with that pain. In the same way as if you are up on stage and you sing something, you do something, and the crowd responds, and you go, wow, that felt really good. I'm going to do that again, because I'm not living with the pain, I'm living with the joy. And once you live with joy, once you live with a sense of happiness, you want to keep having happiness. When I went to the Krishna temple, I was actually got into a bit of a discussion with the guy who was leading the course, or leading his presentation about Krishna. And I was talking to him, and he was saying, well, why would you not want joy all the time? Well, that's a very interesting question. Why would I not want joy all the time? Maybe I do want joy all the time. I don't think I do. I think I like the warp and weft of things. I like it the sorrow and happiness. Makes us human, I think. And that's also, you look at the world. The world has to have light and it has to have dark. It can't exist without. In fact, it's trying, and it's not doing very well. We're losing a lot of nocturnal species because we're trying to light up the darkness. So we do need to have these shades. But that joy, don't suppress the moments that could be joyous. Don't make all the moments sorrow. Make some real joy, real, spiritually, and when I say spiritually, I mean your being is free. Your being comes out of you. You feel, when you feel happy. I don't know when anybody else. I get the idea, because we laugh, we smile, we show the expression. People with neurodivergence don't sometimes. They don't show it, but they're massively. I worked with a guy who was disabled for a while. He showed joy like nobody else I'd ever worked with. Nobody else. He had a Wilhelm's syndrome. He couldn't move his arms and his legs. He was sat in a wheelchair. We used to play Monopoly, and he'd use a thing where he'd, like water text to type sort of thing. Very advanced. But we played Monopoly. The joy that kid had was incredible. Incredible. Just profound sense of joy. Just me playing a game of Monopoly with him. He got so happy. So don't ever suppress your joy. I think that's my point. And that comes down to playfulness again. Listen to the children playing in the playground. They're not expressing themselves with, oh, it was fun. No, it's exorbitant, it's massive exhalation of incredible sound. And that is what's real to us. Again, that's why we love music so much, because it's that sound. It's that audible sense, or it's that physical sense. If you see someone clapping, you see someone smiling, you're interacting with the world. Again, the physical nature of our bodies and our being. And that's why it's so important as well to be outside, be in the world, be present, be really happy when you can. That's what I would ask everyone to do as well. Be happy.
And I think this is a beautiful note to close off. So thank you for sharing, because there's been a lot of anecdotes, a lot of wisdom. So thank you for this conversation.
Thank you, Piotr. I honestly, I've been given the opportunity to speak at weddings. I've been given the opportunity to speak in various other platforms and do my songs. But nobody really, and I've talked to my life coach, nobody has given me the platform to talk about my being in the way that you have. So, you said you feel like your work is going in this direction. Keep going in that direction, mate, because you're doing incredible stuff. And I hope also, we talked about music, I hope you and me can get together and do a bit of jamming.
Possibly.
See what's possible, and keep playing.
That's right. If you'd like to find out more about what David does and connect with him, you'll find links in the description down below. Thanks for listening, and I see you in the next episode.